Hello, South Florida. Welcome to the midweek edition of the Real Estate Show. The midweek report here is held every Wednesday evening here, but our radio show is on 5 days a week. That's right, Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. until 5:30. And from about 1999, so 22 plus years, America's longest running daily radio show about real estate, and South Florida's #1 show about real estate, giving you all the information, the real information, not just the real estate, but the real information that you need here to do well, to make the right decisions in real estate. For 22 years, we have been sort of the guiding light for a lot of real estate investors here in South Florida and across the country. You know, we started out here in our little humble beginnings on the AM station here in South Florida. One of the 5 different ways that you can listen to our show. You can listen to us on the AM 1470, part of the Money Talk Radio Network. You can listen to us on the FM dial at 95.3, 96.9, and others up and down the dial. You can listen to us just right on your smartphone or your smart device, your iPad. Just go to one of the free apps that you can download, the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn app, and even WWNN has their own app that you can download for free. And then just search for WWN Money Talk Radio 1470. And as long as you're here at 5, then we'll be live. It's live all day long, but there's lots of other shows there for that station. The 4th different way that you can listen to our radio show is on our website. Always the fail-safe, easy to remember. Just go to automaticlandlord.com. That's automaticlandlord.com. Go to the top of the page where you will see the real estate show tab. Click on the drop down, and if you're there live at 5, you can listen to us as we stream. If you're not, no worries at all. You can listen to yesterday's show or our most recent. And they're all in chronological order going backwards so that you can pick the date that you want to listen to. Now, every day, every week, we pick a theme. This week, we've been talking about landlords after talking about the moratorium for the week before, kind of on the trail. And I got some great articles that I wanted to share with you today in our midweek report specific to our theme this week. And so Mondays, we set the agenda, we set the foundation, the definitions, the explanations. Tuesdays, get right to it. Let's talk about the tools, tips, and techniques that we are employing now. Not theory, not concepts, but the actual things that are going on and working now. And then Wednesday, we come to our midweek report, which we'll get to in just a second. Tomorrow, don't miss tomorrow. We're going to start talking about the numbers, the landlording numbers, about the money. And that should be a very interesting show. And one more reason why I started off the week by saying now is a great time to be involved in real estate, and an even better time to be involved in real estate as a landlord. In fact, yesterday I had a really good breakdown of the difference of the different styles of investing in real estate, from wholesaling, buying contracts and reselling contracts, to fix and flip, to being a buy and hold owner. You know, the big money in real estate, where, you know, most millionaires in real estate were created through ownership of real estate, not so much the trading of it. And that's one of the cool things that we want to highlight and then go into the numbers tomorrow. Meanwhile, you know, as we talked about last week, was the moratoriums. They were allowed to expire. I talked about this on one of my mastermind coaching groups that I conduct, and I was explaining across the board why the CDC, which had promised that they were not going to renew, in a way they didn't lie. They simply started a brand new moratorium, a different type of a moratorium based on county-wide infection rates as opposed to something across the board global. But real estate landlords filed a salvo of lawsuits right after. And so I think the ink wasn't even dry when I think a number of groups were already preparing in case if. And literally a day after, the Biden administration, through the CDC, issued a new policy protecting renters from eviction, a series of real estate and landlord groups tried to invalidate it. setting up another, it's not the first time, legal showdown over a moratorium that Democrats say is essential to keeping Americans in their home. And, I'm all for that as well. However, I just think you can't paint with such a broad brush and leave such a large margin for abuse. The petition arrived the day after from groups including the Alabama Association of Realtors. Up until now, the associations of realtors across the country were defending the moratorium, but now they've seen a different side to this. Also, its counterpart in Georgia, arguing the latest eviction order issued by the Centers for Disease Control exceeds the agency's authority. In fact, that's been the argument all along. And the group asked a federal judge in D.C. to halt the new protections, citing the district court's prior ruling that found the government's first eviction ban to be unlawful. Remember, I mentioned and explained that was already the CDC lost the first case, but it was that's why they said we're not going to renew it. They let everybody to believe nothing to worry about, nothing to do here. Everybody watched, and of course that's why they were ready to file another series of lawsuits. Some of these groups, not only landlord groups, but property management groups, just imagine what a nightmare it is for them. They get paid a percentage of the rents received. And if nobody's paying rent, then their income also goes to zero. Now, who do they turn to for assistance in this? They can't do their proper job. They don't get paid for their proper job. And so now you put more people out of work. And in some cases, I think unjustly so. So the previous admissions that it did not have the authority, the White House said so. That's why they didn't do it themselves. They pressured the CDC into doing it. And so for days, the president's top aides had insisted they needed Congress to draft legislation. Who didn't? Only to cave amid pressure from Democrats as they struggled to pass a law. The industry opponents even referenced comments from President Biden himself, who said on Tuesday, in the hours before the new eviction policy was announced, that it was at risk of being upended in the courts anyway. So he readily admitted that he didn't know if he really had the authority to do it or who had the authority to do it. So obviously, that's something that's going to be questioned and debated and fought over in court. If successful, the challenge threatens fresh uncertainty for perhaps millions of Americans who are behind on their monthly rents, facing the prospect of eviction, and also then it puts in question their ability to get federal aid. Now, remember, last week I talked about and gave out resources for that federal aid and the state aid and the county aid, and even by city, there may be monies available. So if you're in that situation, I don't want you to feel like I'm not sympathetic to it. All I'm saying is that it needs to be vetted and proper. Those that need help should get the help. Those that are just gaming the system, living a good life with basically a raise of free rent, that to me is just not fair all the way around. Not fair to folks with the jobs, who have functions to do, not fair to the landlords. And then in our second half of the program, I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about some of the statistics, and you're going to see some numbers that bear out. I'm constantly saying that the landlords, by and large, the majority of the landlords are in fact small businesses. And there are people like you and me who may have a second home. Maybe they lived in a place, decided not to sell it, or could not sell it at the time when they bought their next home due to relocation, due to upsizing, downsizing, whatever the case may be. And so they were accidental landlords. But nothing wrong with that. In fact, probably in the long run, it will benefit them because real estate is an appreciating asset. There are those that properly, they scraped and saved and knew that real estate was a great investment, and never in their wildest imagination, because it's never happened before, did they ever think that a secondary agency would not related to real estate would be the reason why they could not or would not receive rents. In the end, I think the picture is generally rosy. Yesterday, I talked about some of the statistics of, that in the grand scheme of things, the percentage of landlords not receiving their rents is low. However, all you have to do is be one of those landlords to know that the impact is very high. So in just a recap, in the 5-4 vote, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, by the way, a judge appointed by the former administration, joined the majority, and he was the only justice to explain the vote. Why? And he said that the CDC lacked authority, but wanted an orderly end to the eviction policy. In other words, here's that soft landing concept that I've been talking about that is in everybody's best interest, that if we can ease out, and of course, at the time, even when this ruling was done, everyone was sensing that the infection rates and everything were going down, only to find out with the new Delta variant that now we're seeing numbers go the other way. We found out, in terms of volume and numbers, that we're where we were 6 months ago. So it was, one step forward, now 2 steps backwards. And so I think that probably will have to be taken into consideration as well. And therefore, that any extension would require clear and specific congressional authorization through new legislation. And I think that's where this is all headed. It's going to be sent back to Congress, and that will be an interesting debate. It'll be especially interesting in light of the huge infrastructure bill that they're trying to pass and all of that additional spending. So this will be some interesting debate coming up. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk more about the U.S. rental market outlook. And that, I think, is important for everybody involved, for everyone's property values in any neighborhood. It matters, especially for landlords. And of course, tenants pay close attention. This could someday be you. Anyway, you're listening to The Real Estate Show. If you want to get our free report, a copy of a summary of the U.S. rental market outlook, text the word landlord to 561-861-2366. Once again, that's 561-861-2366. Again, the word is landlord. Text it right now. We'll be right back. And there we go. We are live. It looks like we're live on YouTube, but it was a completely different way for me to log in today. It looked the format and the structure completely different. So I wonder what whether that was a change just on the interface or something else going on. You just never know. It's in the world of social media. Supply and demand. That's the conversation here today. In the context of landlords. But tomorrow will be fun when we break down the numbers and you'll understand even more why the strategy or approach of landlording right now is particularly favorable. Maybe if we have time, we can talk a little bit about special financing. We could spend probably the next week just talking about exit strategies to all this. Anyway, we're back. And welcome back. For those of you just joining us here on The Real Estate Show, my name is Eric Willner. I am your host, and we are here talking about the U.S. rental property market. Very interesting. Never before in history have we been going through the things that we've been going through, even though the pandemic is so supposedly a once in a lifetime occurrence, and I hope and pray that it really is. What happened with the real estate market during the pandemic is a one-time, first-time thing. But let's take a more specific look. The U.S. rental property market, and understand where we're going at, is growing. And it is growing, just unfortunately, just like inventory, not keeping up with the growing demand for it. And so, although the issue isn't an important one for the federal government, an ailing rental property market and landlords in distress will not bode well for housing workers who are expected to begin work again post-pandemic. And if wages don't rise, they'll be stressed to pay the going rate for limited supply of rental properties and rental apartments. And rental income units are an increasingly, think about this, it's an increasingly important part of the U.S. housing market. It's always been one of the main pillars. In fact, usually it's one of the main pillars that's the last to go when the market starts sputtering and failing. And we saw that back even in 2008. We saw that 2008, we had that mini stock market crash that preceded the real estate market following later. The return on the expenditure in property market is much better than the economic sectors, and that is according to a report that I'm gonna share with you in a little bit. And the rental income units are increasingly important part of the general economy, not just the U.S. housing market. So if the public knew more about real estate markets, they might encourage policies and actions needed to end the needless, and all the stress we're talking about, the moratoriums, and so we would probably have better policies. The government has already proven itself not to be very good at managing real estate. That's why, you hear the expression, the housing projects are never a great place to live. Those provided by the private sector are always much better looking, much better maintained, much more affordable. Maybe not much more affordable, because if the government is subsidizing or paying for it, it may not seem more affordable, but they're run much more inefficiently, and as a result, they're actually more costly. So with stimulus, now let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure that's so much in the economy. If this bipartisan, in parentheses or in quotations, infrastructure deal does go through, the rental property market will heat up. So those of you who are contemplating or thinking about real estate, this is why you want to copy this report. You want to text the word landlord to 561-861-2366. And I'll give the number out at the end, but the word is landlord. Both federal and state governments are recommending renter bailout packages for renters, which means more money into the renter's hands, which goes into the landlord's hands, which goes into the housing market. Only sort of adding more fuel into inflation and the real estate market. That bailout will, and rightly so, because they have been put under a very stressful situation, but it will help U.S. landlords and rental property investors as rent in arrears, which has reportedly passed $70 billion. Now, remember yesterday, and I think also Monday I mentioned it, that the federal government has so far set aside $45 billion. $70 billion due, $45 billion coming to the rescue, meaning we're at about a 60-40 split there of who will and who will not get paid. And that's assuming that the money went exactly to where it was supposed to go. And because of the abuse going on in the marketplace, I'm worried that it's not going to. So in California, for example, they announced a state plan. Remember, they're the ones that already automatically extended their moratorium on a state level. They announced a plan regarding paying renters rent in arrears retroactively. The federal eviction moratorium, which was extended to July 31st. The extensions, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Without government aid, the end of the moratorium would have created a crisis, and that's why they did that. With stimulus, the threat of debt/eviction crisis is significantly less because nobody can do anything, and everyone is sort of in this state of suspension. And I want to jump down to some of the numbers, why the huge demand for rentals and why are prices rising. Zumper's June report, and that's the most recent one that there was, shows that rent prices are rising, and they're rising faster in big, expensive cities. Rent prices have risen 5% in San Francisco, Austin, Fort Lauderdale, St. Pete, with stimulus checks and a return of economic activity as states reopen. The demand for the rentals in apartments that were abandoned last year will now grow again. The forces that cause landlords to drop their prices and suffer vacancies have eased. The rise in rents for the rest of 2021 and 22 is probably going to be a surprise to a lot of people. Be a landlord. While renters are asking if rent prices will fall, it appears that they're ready to rise and rise much farther. And remember, I even told you that Invitation Homes, the largest owner of rental properties in the United States, they already announced an 8% rise in their rents. So there's some neat charts. I'm going to send a link to if you request a report, I'm going to get a link to this whole report here. I want to jump down to some of the trending tops. Small landlords are still the backbone of the residential property industry, according to the report. When the rental housing market failed last May, the government leaned heavily on landlords to pay the bills while tenants and mortgage banks trembled in fear. We all discovered how important local landlords are to communities and local economies. While big real estate corporations received infusions of stimulus cash, and of course they have full-time staff, lawyers, accountants, and everything else working full-time to get the maximum of the stimulus, and they did. We saw all the headlines of the big guys who got the money. And many landlords are confused even where to go. Small landlords found rent default was a problem, and receiving stimulus funds themselves was very, very difficult. Many of them reported selling condos, apartments at a discount to some of these cash-rich, big hedge fund buyers because they just, they had to get out. Despite an unfair playing field, and that's what we're seeing right here, it's unlikely, or it's more likely, that small real estate investors and small businesses will find a way to buy rental properties, income properties, and flourish in 2021, 22, and the next 5 years, according to this report. And that's why, like I said, I'm so bullish with all of that. When you look at the population demographics, the shift to remote working becoming more of a reality, long-term, and all of these factors that I just mentioned to you, we've learned that for some, being rental landlords is a business, not a hobby, and new solutions are definitely going to be helpful. What is the size of the U.S. rental property? This is a little teaser for tomorrow's show. According to researchandmarkets.com, the global real estate rental market is expected to grow from 1.7 trillion, 1.759 trillion in 2019 to 1.787 trillion in 2020. And they're looking at a compounded growth rate of almost 2%, growing the rental market. Now, remember, that's a shift from owner-occupied to non-owner-occupied properties. So this is going to be very, very interesting. And they believe that the market will recover and grow to at the rate of 8% in 2021 and reach over 2,216 billion by 2023. So there you have it. Again, if you want some of these statistics for yourself, text the word landlord to 561-861-2366. Once again, that's 561-861-2366. Also want to report how maybe landlording is right for you, and now's maybe a great time to do so. And we got the financing and some of the programs, the down payment assistance and so forth. Again, landlord 561-861-2366. That's it for today. This is Eric Willner signing off. I'll be back here, same place again tomorrow. Until then, drive safe, wash those hands, and make it a great day. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to power down there, power down on our live YouTube. Where did that go? There it is. And 25-minute stream there. That will end.